Releasing Shame is Your Superpower, and today we're talking about when the victim becomes the abuser, because this is a phenomenon that is all too common. It's all
Yes.
about these cycles, these generational cycles of abuse that happen. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us again. We're excited for this one. It's a really big one.
Oh, thank you for joining me, and you're welcome. Yeah, this topic is really, it's a hot topic for us. What we see happening a lot of times with people who have gone through abuse of power is that this cycle continues for many generations. I'm sure, Freya, you can speak into that showing up for many generations in your family. And as far back as I'm able to look, even with current generations, the abuse of power has gone back at least 5 generations that I'm aware of. And it's all similar types of abuse of power. So today we want to dispel some mystery around that and try to remove some shame.
Yes, yes, yes. And this is the thing, is so often when people come to the awareness that what they are doing is abusive, it's actually abusive, then they fall into the shame of that and the self-loathing of that. And the self-loathing was somebody already present within them from the abuse that they experienced. And so then it becomes really, really difficult to shift and change that and stop the cycle. But the good news is that awareness is the first step to healing. So it's not useful to fall into that cycle of shame and continuing it on, because like we said, it's because of the trauma that's been experienced. And Kelly, you were talking yesterday about mirroring neurons and all of this, how that perpetuates the cycle. And I'd love for you to explain that, because you explained it so well when we were having the conversation, and it totally resonated for me.
Yeah, I would love to explain. So how we learn as children, we have these mirroring neurons inside of us. And basically the theory behind that is we mirror back what's been shown to us. And as well, what's important to notice is that our neocortex, where all of our higher thinking and reasoning skills lie, that is not fully developed until about the age of 25. So a person's ability to think and reason really isn't fully matured until about the age of 25. And so we're actually operating more from the more primitive parts of our brain, our mammalian and reptilian brain, until the age of 25. And so what happens when we continually see or repeatedly see a lot of abuse of power, whether it's violent words, violent actions, sexual abuse, however that abuse shows up, when that is a repeated behavior pattern that we witness and we learn from, we naturally begin to mirror that in the world. One tangible way that I can think of is growing up in a home with a lot of criticism and a lot of yelling. I actually became very critical of myself, very critical of the world around me, and also very violent with my words. And that violence ended up perpetuating into other types of violence. And then there was the shaming put on top of me of, oh, well, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do this. And it's very confusing for a child when all that they have learned is abuse of power. And so this is why we bring this up nearly every week, because those who have been abused repeatedly, this is what they end up carrying into the world.
Yes. Yes. And I want to clarify, as you said again, that every kind of abuse, whether it be sexual or any other kind, is all abuse of power. And this is one way that we can release the shame around sexual abuse, is that it's all abuse of power. The person didn't do anything wrong. They didn't ask for it or anything else. They're not dirty because of it. It's all abuse of power. And when you put it down to that, that releases some shame right there.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that the victim ends up becoming the abuser, one of the ways that we see a lot is this nice guy who, and Freya, you and Michael talk about this really well, so I'm going to let you take this one.
Yes, there's this spectrum that people see that's sort of the nice guy and the bad boy, and it's really interesting because they think the nice guy is the nice guy and the bad boy is the bad guy, and that's not actually the truth. And it's all on this spectrum of distorted masculinity that the patriarchal or dominator culture has made us see as what is masculinity. And so the difference is that the nice guy is covert in the manipulation and abuse, and the bad boy is overtly abusive. And one thing that I've noticed is a lot of times women will fall into choosing the bad boy over the nice guy. And what I really got in touch with this morning around that is that a woman or a man, and this happens with women as well, but the woman will sense the covert manipulation, which is being presented as being nice and so you owe me or whatever, and she'll sense that manipulation and will become resentful, and then will choose like the bad boy personalities of men over the nice guy because it seems more honest. At least you know what you're getting, and at least you know you're getting that excitement of that bad boy personality, which seems more authentic. It seems more honest, and yet both of them are abusive, and so that cycle will perpetuate. And this kind of same behavior pattern can happen in women as well. They'll be covertly manipulative. In fact, that's even more common with women. But so this is the kind of thing that happens. And when you are exposed to this kind of behavior over and over and over, it becomes the normal. And people just don't know anything else, and so they think it's okay, or they're not quite sure what's wrong, but they feel something's wrong, and then they're unable to get out of that pattern of abuse. So does that
that
is there
helps.
anything else that you were feeling?
No, you did a really great job explaining it, and I feel like one of the roots of this nice guy syndrome can be found in a way that victims are manipulated as children. How many of us who have gone through abuse of power have gone through a grooming period? I went through a very long grooming period with one man in particular who wanted to molest me. And that right there, it's a learned behavior to start manipulating somebody to get what you want, to make them feel like they are on board with what you want, and then put them on a guilt trip afterwards. So this isn't to say that every nice guy is a manipulator, because there are genuinely really good men out there. This is just to shine a light on a shadow aspect.
Not every nice person nice. It's actually kind rather than nice. Not every
so it's not every nice guy is a manipulator. It's just shining a light on that shadow aspect of that being a point for manipulation. And then there's also the overcompensating. So this can show up in like aggressive behavior. This is something that's learned as well from how a person is raised. A lot of times what happens is this overcompensation happens. So for example, I shared earlier that I saw a lot of yelling growing up. And so what I would do when things were out of control in my household, I would raise my voice. I would overcompensate with all the chaos that's around me and raise my voice and raise my force to get the control I needed.
Yes.
Have you experienced anything with, what are some ways that you've experienced people overcompensating? Like how that shows up in an abusive way?
Yes, and people will go either one way or the other. They'll overcompensate or they'll withdraw and make themselves really small and try to hide and hopefully be safe.
Mm-hmm. So the point we want to make with the overcompensating factor is, again, it's a learned behavior. It's something that was near to them, and that's how they show up.
Yes, absolutely. That's huge.
And then we have spiritual bypassing, which is this use of conscious languaging that is meant to manipulate. And growing up in a religion that was very common, I'm sure that was common for you as well, Freya, and even in this conscious sexuality, sacred sexuality realm, there are a lot of people who use words to manipulate. And I'm curious what your experience has been with that.
Yes, I've seen that a lot, and it happens a lot, like you say, in religious communities, and definitely experienced that a lot. And again, using the fear of hell and all of these things to keep the person who is being abused stuck in that space of being abused, and the abuser is it's all about power. So they'll use the spiritual language and ideas and twist them in a ways that just keep them in that place of power and the other person in that place of thinking they're crazy or in fear. And it's a very, very powerful way of manipulating, and that is again the way sexuality has been construed to be shameful and evil and all of this throughout the realms of patriarchal domination and religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, that's also been pulled into the space of modern spirituality, new age sexuality and spirituality, like that's hugely common in there. And they'll use like very quote conscious language to manipulate in relationships and to manipulate around sexuality. There's this whole persona of the excuse my French, the spiritual fuckboy type of persona now, where they're using conscious languaging and spirituality to manipulate and control and to shame women, mostly women, but it can happen with men as well, into like having sexual experiences with them, because if they are not open to that with them, then they must have some blocks or they must have some issues around their sexuality, and let me heal you, and all of it's very, very manipulative. And it is, again, it's abuse of power. So it, all in the guise of conscious languaging and spirituality, and this happens in intimate relationships as well as in casual encounters. And so yeah, it's really big. And again, they fall into the nice guy end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I remember so many times hearing things like, oh, I've been praying for you, and I really feel like the Holy Spirit is telling me blah, blah, blah. Or, that's from my religious days, or even nowadays, it's like, yeah, I'm sensing an energy, I'm sensing a blockage. And those things can seem very innocuous. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to lean into what's the intention behind it. And also, how does your body feel when you hear these words? If there is any contraction, there's a pause. If your body is not a 100% fuck yes to anything that's being presented to you, no matter how spiritual it sounds, it's a no. It's a pause. Yeah. It's an opportunity to wait for your body to be 100% fuck yes, and then proceed. So this is why we want to bring up the spiritual bypassing thing, because there has been a lot of abuse of power in spiritual communities. It doesn't even have to be religious. It's in the conscious community. It's in the sacred sexuality community. And this is why we're shining a light on it. And a lot of these people have been manipulated the very same ways. And this is why they show up this way. And a lot of it is just, it's fear of being in the wrong. I mean, I know for me, there were so many things around my sexuality that kept me from exploring my sexuality. So using spiritual terms to keep me from exploring my sexuality, using spiritual terms to keep me from exploring ways that would actually heal myself, all because of this fear of being wrong, of offending some God.
Yes. And again, with that conscious slash spiritual language as a form of manipulation, you see this kind of thing not only regarding sexuality but regarding healing. There's a lot of people in
Emotions.
this healer community around shaming emotions, around shaming triggers and trauma. And if you would just meditate, then you would be able to heal yourself, and you're not doing it right. And or you,
Or if
how
you
did
would just
you get back
release.
to your space? How did you create that? Or like you create your reality. So how did you draw that rapist into your space? Or what did you do to create that? Or you agreed to that experience before you came here, so just learn from it and get over it. And then there's also the what was I just gonna say? Darn.
It's gonna
Anyhow,
come.
it's gonna come. But oh, here, yes. Or you're my twin flame. How dare you choose out of this relationship? Because we're
Yeah.
supposed to be on life purpose together. Never mind that the person is fucking abusive and narcissistic, but they'll literally use that kind of a thing to manipulate and control and keep someone in that space of being abused and under their power. It's about power and manipulation and control. And I've seen that twin flame bit quite often get abused, and it's like it's a twisted concept anyway, and then using it as power over the other person to keep them in that realm of abuse.
And really what it does is it's invalidating the wisdom that's inside the individual receiving that information. It's
Yes.
invalidating their own intuitive voice when they receive that information. And for people who have been abused, they're the what's the word I'm looking for? The vagus nerve. The vagus nerve starts to not function properly after a lot of repeated abuse, which then affects the intuition. And this is what makes people so susceptible to being manipulated by things like spiritual languaging. And so what my therapist told me when I first started my healing journey with talk therapy was to err on the side of caution. Err on the side of caution. So that's my invitation to everyone here as well. Another way that we see how the victim becomes the abuser is in controlling behavior. And this is rooted, really, I find this to be rooted in just the absolute chaos that a person is raised in. And so they seek to control in other ways that they're able to control. So for some people, this can be obsessive cleaning, this can be obsessive caretaking, the moral police, managing other people's problems, micromanaging sexual choices, overprotecting their children. So being so afraid that their children are going to make a mistake that they overprotect them.
Mm-hmm.
And in my house, cleaning was huge. I think there was so much chaos that the one way that my mom was able to have some sort of semblance of control was with cleaning. And then for me, how my controlling behavior ended up showing up in the future was being the moral police. My family will testify. I was super fanatical for many years, nearly 20 years. And I was definitely the moral police and trying to help everyone manage their life instead of managing my own life and what was going on inside. And what we see oftentimes with this controlling behavior is it's really an underlying manifestation of a lot of internal chaos that's not under control. And so they seek control in other ways.
Yes, I've witnessed this a lot as well in the community, like the religious community that I came from, as well as other uh, religious communities that have a lot of patriarchal influence, which is, you know, most of them. But the more strict and fanatical they are, the more I've witnessed this, especially with women, because like the men have control over their families, and so there's that abusiveness. But these other ways of like being almost obsessive compulsive in housekeeping, or going completely to the opposite direction. Or one big way I saw it is as a midwife was in birth, and women who don't have control in their other areas of their lives will often try to control their birthing experiences, and have you know, a birth plan that's a mile long, and as soon as you see it, you're like, oh shit, this birth is not going to go well, because this birth requires surrender and trusting the body, and they're not in that space when that happens. Or, you know, or they're scheduling their C-section immediately, or they want their epidural the moment they walk in the hospital door, or, you know, all of these things. That's very, very much attempt to control the only aspect of their lives that they feel that they can. And the truth is they can't in a lot of ways. There's always, you know, whatever happens, and the more controlling we attempt to be, often the exact opposite ends up happening.
We see this with doctors too, who want to force episiotomies on women because it's more convenient for them, which
Yes.
goes against the natural way that women have had babies for, well, since time began. Another thing we see is negative verbal vomiting, or even just verbal vomiting in general. And this really, it's speaking to a lack of boundaries growing up. When there's no filter on the mouth, it usually means there was no filter towards them growing up. And so there's just like this verbal vomit that comes out. As well, the violence that comes with it when children who are abused for so long, and the words that they hear are violent words like, you're worthless, you're stupid, you deserve this, I'll give you something to fucking cry about. I mean, the negative verbal vomit that most of these children endure is incredible. And so naturally they start mirroring this when they grow up. And I was a testimony to that, growing up in a home where there was yelling every day, shouting every day, insults every day, fighting every day. And I showed up in my elementary school with anger and rage and violence and picking on other children, not because I'm an evil child, but because that's what was mirrored to me. And that's the behavior I carried out into the world. I also see like some of the roots of this negative verbal vomiting being receiving a lot of criticism growing up, being put in the wrong box a lot. So a lot of right making, wrong making. Okay, yeah. So looking for wrong, receiving a lot of criticism. Also, not getting a lot of compliments, so feeling this need to actually reject the compliments instead of receiving them. And for me, I'll say I was made wrong a lot growing up. I mean, most of the choices I made, I felt like I was in love, like I loved people and I loved the world. And yet the choices I made were constantly criticized. And so I grew up a very critical and judgmental person, and I brought that into the world. And then we also have physical abuse. So this one, most children who have experienced violence will be violent in return. One of the things I've been leaning into lately in regards to dominator culture and why there's so much violence showing up in dominator culture, and I have this working theory that one of the roots is circumcision. It's a violent act that's done towards a defenseless child who is unable to speak up for themselves and unable to run away from the situation. So their boundaries have been crossed, emotionally, physically, mentally, and with no tools to actually lean into this and heal this. They are essentially, part of their dick is chopped off, then they're sent into the world to figure out how to survive after receiving a violent pain in infancy. And so we wonder, why is there so much violence showing up in this world? If our children are receiving violence within the first week of their life, they're absolutely going to show some violent tendencies growing up. And if they are completely separated from being able to speak up and express their emotions, then we are definitely going to see a lot of men not connected to their emotional body, because they literally had to dissociate as a baby from all of the fucking pain going on and all the violation going on to just make it through. And so I want to highlight this piece to help men, not even help, but just guide men and women towards having a little bit more compassion and understanding towards the men in our lives who have experienced violence. And for children who have experienced other violence, beating. I mean, I was paddled frequently growing up. For minor infractions too. So the messages that are being received to these children is that minor infractions are worth several paddles. Minor infractions are worth a beating. Being born is worth getting your dick chopped off. I mean, there is like no sense of safety in the body. And so yes, this internal discomfort and this internal pain is going to manifest in the world. And so physical trauma like this, any trauma really, is stored on the body level. And so when it's stored on the body level, there's something that there's an energy that needs to be expressed. There you are, you're live again. Awesome.
Yes.
Is there anything you wanted to add towards the physical abuse part?
Yeah, I wanted to add, you were talking about the circumcision issue. I feel like this really, really is a huge, huge thing for boys and men, because it's literally a huge trauma. And there was a Canadian study done that the babies were put through an MRI or CT, I can't remember which, but their brain was resonanced, and they had these images from the brain before, during, and after the circumcision. And it showed permanent changes, and like even like
wow,
later, those changes did not go back to what they had been before the circumcision was experienced. And so it's literally creating a change in the way the brain works because of that intense trauma right after they were born. So we can't, and it was interesting that the medical profession was so up in arms about this that they silenced that study and destroyed the information.
Oh, that makes me so angry.
Yeah. So, well, the thing is, it's a patriarchal system, and it's monetized, and there's like millions and billions of dollars every year that goes through the medical industry for the routine circumcision. And
let's not forget, war is for profit.
Yes, war is for profit. And when you can start by like instilling pain and war into a child's mind from the time they're a newborn, that's pretty big. Yeah,
it is. And I'm so glad we're speaking on this, because if this doesn't outrage people that the chemistry of the men in our world is being changed at birth through a violent act. Like this, I feel like this needs to wake people up. This is a wake-up call to the systemic abuse of power that's been going on for a long time. Oh, that gets me boiling a little bit. Yeah. And then there's the sexual abuse. Okay. God, I feel like this is one of the most confusing things for children to go through. For a number of reasons. When that sexual boundary is violated, especially at a young age, there is a sexualization that takes place with children, and it's at an age that's too young for them to comprehend why they're feeling what they're feeling. And so when that boundary has been violated and their sexuality has been woken, it automatically makes them more susceptible to sexual advances.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also will get distorted, and it can be, it's used to shame women, and with little boys it's used to shame and silence them as well. And so often what we see is this cycle of abuse will go from person to person, because a child who's been abused and sexualized is actually way more likely to abuse other children as well as they grow up. So it again gets perpetuated, and then you've got these young boys who are ending up abusing step siblings or even their own siblings, or just all of this stuff that goes on, and it's the cycle is perpetuated and perpetuated. And then parents have so much shame around this that they keep silence around it, even if they know what's going on, or they will, you know, again, it's that silence. They don't talk to the child who's been abused when they suspect it's happened. They don't they don't put precautionary measures in place to keep that from continuing to happen. They don't have those conversations with their children about what is appropriate touch and what's not appropriate touch, and the fact that they're not to blame if it happens, and to, you know, to keep opening that channel so that they feel protected and safe and accepted no matter what happens to them. So healing can be created if something does happen. But not only that, it's more likely to happen when it's kept secret and perpetuated. So yeah, it's this shame is keeping the cycle in place.
Mm-hmm. It does keep the cycle in place. And I remember, oh God, I would say sexual abuse has probably been the abuse that has had the most far-reaching effects in my life personally. I remember somebody I love dearly being aware that they were probably molested at a very young age. They started exhibiting signs of being molested. And we talked to the mom about it, and we said, hey, we believe your child has been sexually molested. These are the reasons why. It's a good idea to get this child help, because if you don't, the chances of them becoming a perpetrator are exponentially increased. Well, the child never got help. In fact, the child went through just fucking horrific abuse. And what ended up happening was this child ended up molesting his brother and sister, and also inciting another young boy to rape his sister. And, you know, as someone who is a victim of sexual abuse, and I feel that rage inside of me towards a grown man who had the nerve to touch a child, I feel that rage. And at the same time, what I also see is the reality of an innocent child being completely corrupted. I don't want to say completely. I want to say a child being sullied by the filthy desires of somebody else, and then that pain never being resolved and manifesting into adulthood. I can see both sides of the spectrum, of somebody showing up in abuse of power, but then also what did they go through in their child that made them show up in their abuse of power? And right now, I find this topic so important. We find this topic so important because we see abuse of power on such a large scale. And there are underlying reasons. We aren't our enemies. We simply need to understand ourselves and end that war inside.
Yes, and this is the issue, is that until we heal the war within ourselves, the war in the external world around us is never going to end. It never is, because as within, so without, we are the world around us is a reflection of what's inside of us. And the more people who actually do the work to heal, then the sooner this is going to happen. And the thing is, if we only are offering healing to those who have been abused, but not those who are abusers, then it's never going to end, because the abused become the abusers. And we have to release the shame around this.
Yes.
Anyone can heal, anyone can change. They just have to decide that they want to, and that it's possible. They have to believe that it's possible. So we want to put this out there as a message of hope to people who maybe have shame around the things that they have done, about how they have shown up in life in ways that are abusive, even if it was to children or anyone else. And people who come to us and go through the healing process, we honor their courage. And anything that comes up from their past, that is the past. If they have the courage to step forward and to heal that, I so honor that. And there is absolutely no judgment.
Absolutely. And I would say the victim shaming is what keeps a lot of these abusers silent, these people that abuse their power. This is what keeps people in their shame and in their abuse, really. I received a lot of criticism growing up too about how angry I was. And it's interesting to me that nobody ever asked me what my home life was like.
Yeah. It's just all this judgment about behaviors and no inquiry, no curiosity as to why that is.
Yeah, even at 15 years old, going in therapy every week, bawling my eyes out, and I'm handed some pills for depression. Like, depression is going to touch the abuse I'm enduring and change that, you know? It's like, things have got to change. We have got to come to this place where we are embracing every single person where they are at. Every single person has a story. I watched a beautiful video a few weeks ago of this powerful woman who works with men in prison. And she just started going through a list of, she created this huge circle of all these prisoners, and just started saying things like, if you frequently or very often saw violence in your home, step into the circle. And it was incredible to see that every single person incarcerated experienced not just one bit of childhood trauma. Nearly every single person answered yes to nearly every single question. So it's time that we stop blaming and shaming and wrong making and seeking to understand each other and fix these systemic problems, because this is what's causing the abuse of power, not people. People are good and full of love, and we need to guide each other back home to that love.
Yes. Yes, this is essential. This is the only way it's going to change in the world.
So that's one way that we want to create shift in this world, is through understanding, which is why every week we are talking about different aspects of abuse of power, because we want people to be filled with understanding, which leads to compassion and self-love. And these are the absolutely necessary foundational pieces for you to start your healing journey. And then from there, once you have this understanding that you are not the enemy, then it's finding the practitioners to work with that can guide you into a loving and holding relationship with yourself. So
Yes, yes,
reach
yes.
out to any one of us. And there's Elizabeth making some comments on here. Are you seeing those?
Yes. Okay.
How do you undo?
Yes, Elizabeth. Yes, I think it's expectations of how we're supposed to be, socially unacceptable to our judges in family. We can't we just love? And then they twist into you're the mean one. Yes, this happens all the time. When we're struggling with controllers, they make us submit or break us down. If we comply, they just grow more power. It's okay to not receive it. I said no more. Do not have to receive your abuse. Yes, absolutely. And that's what it takes. And we, when we hold on to having to make the other person admit that they did something wrong, that they did something harmful to us, or we have to know the whys, it keeps us caught in that cycle of perpetual abuse. And so I honor your courage, Elizabeth, for having stepped out of that.
And you don't have to understand all the reasons, and you don't have to get an apology either. There is healing that's available to you regardless of anybody else's choices.
Yes, absolutely. And most of those abusers are the ones especially who are on the narcissistic and psychopathic end of the spectrum are not going to ever admit that they've done anything wrong or that they've done anything abusive. In fact, they will make you crazy. They will.
Oh yeah.
You're the one who was abusive.
My biological dad, or not my biological dad, my adopted father to this day will say, I made some bad choices. That's the extent of his apology. So if you want to hold out for somebody to own what they've done to you, you may be holding out for a long time. Step into your wholeness regardless of where anybody else is at. Reach out, ask for a guide. You know, Michael made a beautiful post the other day about when he healed and how he healed. And part of that is choosing to no longer live under the excuses of anybody else. Choosing to no longer live under the excuse of, well, this person hasn't done this yet, or this person hasn't apologized, or this person hasn't owned, or this person hasn't changed. If you wait for everyone else around you to change, you may never change.
Yes, it's so true. Mika, do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
Well, I was struck by Kelly's pointing out that they gave her pills when she was still in an actively space of being traumatized. And what came up for me is that the abuse has to stop before the healing can begin. So you're completely bypassing the process by giving somebody pills so that basically the message is that your reaction to being abused is the problem, not the abuser. We're not even going to pay attention to the abuse you're in. We're going to give you some pills to get you to chill out.
Yeah,
and how that made me fucking crazy for years. Yeah. I was like, I mean, I was on the toilet crying out to God, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
That's how sinister that is that I was sold a lie that something was wrong with me, that I'm reacting this way, when in fact, I'm reacting perfectly normally. And so is my body.
Normally, your experience, your body was reacting exactly how anybody's would in that experience. And the thing is that depression is most often the manifestation of being in this place with all these intense emotions, this trauma, and feeling like that you don't have the right to feel angry or feel the rage about it. You don't even have the right to feel it, let alone express it. And so when you depress those emotions for long enough, depression is the result of it, the mental result of that. And so the medication, well, people can find it Some people can find it helpful, but what it's literally doing is making your brain go into a state where you're more willing to continue tolerating the existing conditions in your mind and body. So,
because what's happening with these medicines is they're seeking to balance out a chemical imbalance in your brain. What they're failing to do is balance out the misalignment that's causing the imbalance.
yes.
So fine, give yourself some medicine. And if you don't do anything to fix what's causing the imbalance, you're going to drive yourself crazy, and you're going to make yourself the victim and make yourself the broken one, when really you're whole and complete the way you are. Your body is functioning just fine. And it's how do you get in line with your body? How do you partner with the technology of your body mind for your highest and greatest good?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes.
Anything else we want to touch on?
I can't think of anything. I think we've covered everything we talked about.
So I want to end on a vulnerable note. I know Michael, Mika, and Freya well, and they know me well. And each of us has abused our own power and been a victim of abuse of power. And we have done incredible work to heal ourselves, to bring wholeness inside. And this is what we're here for. So whatever category you fall into, we are here for you. You are not alone. This doesn't have to be the end of your story.
Absolutely. And reach out to us if you'd like to explore further. If we're not the right fit for you, we can offer suggestions as to who might be. And so, yeah, we're here in service.
So you can find me at kellyloverewilding.com. I also have the same Facebook page, Kelly Love Rewilding, Mika and Freya.
You can contact us at hello@inannasanctuary.com or on our website, inannasanctuary.com. That's INANNA sanctuary.com. And or here on Facebook, you are perfectly welcome to direct message either of us. So,
yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We love you deeply, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, we'll be back next week. Yes. Bye-bye.